Hello everyone, and welcome to this evening stream where I will be talking about this beautiful instrument, the Fazioli F308. To make a long story short, when the quarantine order came into effect, I was approached by a brilliant engineer and musician by the name of Stephen Norsworthy, who had just brought this piano in from Amsterdam. And he gave me an offer I simply couldn't refuse. Would you like to spend your quarantine, the next few weeks, getting to know my new piano? And it's been quite a journey from when I think back now, over a month ago, to where we are today. And my relationship with this piano, I just learned that Fazioli will be celebrating its 40th anniversary next year, and the company was established the year I was born. An uncanny connection. This is the longest piano in the world market today, at 308 centimeters. That's over 10 feet in length. This model was actually used by numerous concert pianists in the world when they had their European tours. That includes Herbie Hancock during his Berlin tour. And I've often found throughout the internet, on the YouTube, you come across these recordings of someone dressed in jeans with a little iPhone in a piano shop and compares some small jazz ballade on a cheaper $5,000 grand piano and then an expensive one, and tries to get people to tell the difference. However, I don't think that these are truly a fair comparison, and I've listened to a few of them. I can tell a difference with a very trained ear, but the difference is so marginal that I think the only way to really express the unique qualities of a high-end piano is to truly have a great microphone system that can pick up the nuances. Speaking of nuance, I promised a little bit of Chopin, so we'll intermix this with a little bit of music. Here's a poetic little work that every piano student learns in their either in their youth or somewhere in their piano education. It's considered an intermediate piece, although it's quite complex in its underlying tones. There's a little bit of a mazurka dance element. This is number 7 of the Preludes, Opus 28. And I want to play this with the absolute poetic sense of rhetoric, and I want to bring out the lush piano qualities. The use of pedal. Chopin marks long pedal markings. So I have to hold the pedal just halfway, not all the way, but just halfway so that the harmonies don't become mushed. So what I'm trying to achieve when I practice a work like this, I want it to flow from the very first note, from that E, to the very end, the A major. I want these 16 bars to be like one phrase. And the only way to achieve that is when every note has a slightly different level of expression. And we have a certain arch where the emotional energy comes to a certain climax and then resolves at the end. And this is rarely the flattened curve approach you see on the news today. This is almost always a slower rise to the climax and then a rather quick resolution. Another thing I'd like to talk about is articulation. Most of what I've just played in the Chopin Prelude was legato, that is, very connected notes. There is another articulation called staccato, which means detached, where the notes are short. And then we have variations of the two, where we can have a little bit of legato and a little bit of staccato in something called portato. It's not quite completely connected, but it's not entirely detached. And when we go back in time, before the evolution of Bartolomeo Cristoforo's piano in 1720, another Italian inventor, we had the harpsichord and the organ as the primary keyboard instruments. And these, especially the harpsichord, did not allow that kind of legato playing, where you could connect the notes almost like a human voice can, ideally. And so music was also performed on instruments such as the cembalo, the lute, which also utilized the ability of the instruments to direct the composer's musical intentions. And so if we go to the Baroque and we play a work by Johann Sebastian Bach, for example, this weekend on the Saturday live stream, I'll be performing the English Suite number 3. And here we don't have legato in the first prelude. The notes are very well articulated, but they are also not staccato. They are not entirely detached. So, let's see what happens. So this piano has such a well-defined sound that even in this register, this is just below the middle C that everyone starts their piano lessons with, on many pianos, even high-end pianos, these notes don't have the refinement in that first hammer strike that enables me to hear each note so independently that it's almost like a quasi-harpsichord. I'll give a better example. In the second partita of Bach, the great C minor partita, there's a bass line. So here I'm playing it not legato and not staccato, something in between. I'm looking for a Baroque character, something that would resemble the cembalo. On modern pianos today, many musicians play this completely legato because this register sounds muffled on many modern instruments. So the effect is like this. If we add now the top line, here's with legato. And here begins the big discussion we've had for decades now, the Puritans against the modernists. We are not allowed to play Johann Sebastian Bach on the modern piano. It's outrageous. Bach can only sound well and crisp and sparkling with that perpetuum mobile, motoric, Baroque energy on a harpsichord. Yet, my experiments show that I now have such a palette, such a range of articulation available in my disposition on this 308 that I can find a certain compromise and make that energetic, bouncy, like that wonderful walking bass. By the way, jazz musicians love the Baroque because of that walking bass. But if we make it languid, it's not Baroque. So let's try something a little bit more buoyant. Not quite staccato, but a little further away from the connected legato side. This is just one example of some of the joy I'm experiencing with this instrument and its many capabilities in finding a wide range of articulation. Now, for the last month, it took me a while to get used to this instrument. The first 2 weeks were, in fact, a disaster. There was simply too much. Works that I have played since I was in my youth, works that I've performed in public hundreds of times. When I played them on this piano, I would get freaked out. There was just simply too much variety, almost like being given too many tools at my disposition. And it took a while to get used to it, to standardize things in a way that I can now be clear about my interpretive intentions. So in a way, I feel a little bit, I've called this piano a lion in many of my descriptions, and in a way I feel like Daniel in the lion's den, because this piano it can be like a beast. It's made for a huge concert hall, ideally, not a home setting. And the acoustics have also been very challenging, and I won't say some of the little tricks that have been done here to attenuate the acoustical level of the home. And the beauty of having a lion in front of you, especially if you're in a major concert hall and you have a big orchestra, is you want your music to shine. So when, for example, I've done the Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue many times with orchestra, and at the very end, near the Coda, the orchestra, in full tutti, brass, percussion, strings, winds, play this so-called stride in jazz. And then the soloist, the pianist, has to play chops in maximum volume to overcome that incredible sound. And on many pianos, many high-end pianos, this range, the so-called high treble, becomes so faint that I can't remember how many times I've been in a concert hall and the one patron next to me says, "Oh, the orchestra is overpowering him. Pity." And sometimes one just wishes to have more spark in that high treble. So I play with the orchestra. Now that is going to penetrate even the piccolo, which is the loudest instrument in the orchestra. It can pierce right through that enormous amount of sound. So there is much more than just power. And great volume has its benefits. However, what about orchestral color? In the very beginning of the Gershwin, we hear this wonderful trill played by the clarinet. what I just played was a little bit of a dialogue between the solo clarinet and soft strings accompanying. And I can achieve precisely the transparency of every instrument shining forth in its full glory, using the many shades of dynamics, the incredible expressive capability of this instrument. If I want something very, very quiet, like a pianissimo, the instrument allows me to achieve virtually any dynamic, from whispering to that full major tutti orchestral sound. Here's a little bit of Debussy. This begins with two pianos, or pianissimo. It's a very soft dynamic, and if I really work on it, I can achieve a triple pianissimo, which is like a whisper. So, another unique feature that I want to get into based on what I had just performed is a unique aspect to this Fazioli model that many other Fazioli models in the world don't have. And this was invented by a Dutch inventor and musician by the name of Evert Snell. It's called magnetic balancing action. One of the greatest problems I've had as a pianist was that we, as concert pianists, have to get used to a wide range of instruments. Sometimes we go on stages where the instrument is very heavy, say a new piano that just came out of the factory, hasn't been played on much. Other times we'll get a beat-up old concert grand that is too light, and we have to actually put on the brakes on everything we do. The former piano, being too heavy, is a very big complaint among concert pianists today, who, amidst their touring, their complex touring schedules, often have very little time to practice in between concerts. And on stage, if you're now given a piano that's too heavy, it can actually damage your hand. And there have been many cases of tendinitis occurring on the start of a musician's tour. So this piano uses something called magnetic balancing action, where the weight, or the feeling of the weight you have of the keys, the mass, is adjusted not by heavy lead bolts, lead weights that are inside each key. That's the traditional technique that's been used for decades. Instead, there are no weights in the keys, no lead weights. Instead, we have a magnetic field that controls the level of inertia. So inertia has an effect on the mass. The heavier an object is, the more inertia you need to get it going. So on a heavy piano, you have more energy required to depress the key, but then you also have to wait for it longer to return, to rebound. And there is a magnetic field inside that regulates that, and each pianist can now regulate the weight they want by using these handy little nuts inside. Each one controls a certain region, so you can actually fine-tune it. If you want the right hand to be heavier, or traditionally the bass to be heavier, you can adjust it to your liking. And there comes a time, I've had this happen in some works that are very, very difficult. Alborada del Grazioso of Ravel has a repeated note that's been treacherous for legions of concert pianists. But then in the Gershwin also, just to keep topic, there is a section in the middle that uses a repetitive note that gets louder. And I have to say, there comes a moment, thanks to this magnetic balancing action, where it almost feels like I'm not doing the work anymore, like some AI device takes over and things become effortless. So some modern pianos have that beautiful ability to sing. The notes are sustained. And you can tell a bad piano immediately by simply playing one note and listening to its decay, ideally in a concert hall, but in any setting. I still hear it. That's what we call Cantabile, where a note can sing. And it comes through best in a series of notes. For example, in a Chopin nocturne or in a prelude, where we want that beautiful singing line. And we want that bell-like character of the note to carry through. Because as pianists, we're a bit cursed. A singer, after executing their note, can then shape it. They can add a vibrato to it. Also a violinist. With pianists, after we play the note, there's nothing we can do to fix our mistakes. That's all we get. And we base the next note on the decay of the first one. So we have to be very active listeners and listen to how long a note can ring, because all our music depends on that. Now, there are so many unique features I'm just learning about. It literally feels like a kid in a candy store. There are many technical things that I won't even get into. However, the fine craftsmanship is something that is truly astounding. The fine craftsmanship of this piano is truly astounding. There are features found on other instruments that have been refined by Fazioli. Paolo Fazioli being, of course, a mechanical engineer by training and also having a degree in music, has both the knowledge and the ear to achieve the vision he wants to achieve, the sound he wants to achieve. And every aspect of the piano, from the type of wood used, for example, the soundboard comes from the beautiful picturesque Dolomiti Mountains in Italy. Every piece of metal is made for music. Everything resounds. Everything has a musical purpose. Every little ingredient in the over 12,000 pieces used in this instrument has a purpose and has been tested and refined to the highest level. The other thing I want to point out that I've had a lot of fun with from the very beginning is the fourth pedal. And this works like the traditional left pedal of an upright, where the hammers are brought closer to the string. So, because you have less momentum on the hammer attack, that enables you also to get a softer sound. And the two pedals at the end have been shaped together so that you can use both at the same time. So now the hammers are going closer to the strings, and we're only hitting 2 strings instead of 3 in this register. So that enables a world of new sound opportunity. I tried this actually in the Pastoral Sonata, just before the reprise, the recapitulation. There's a little hesitation in order to get back to the original key. Just like a little question mark. Where are we? Where have we gone? And then Beethoven goes back to the reprise. And that little bar, I simply used both pedals. And it just put the whole development to a close. So then I can release the fourth pedal, the very last one, and simply go una corda for the reprise. So putting this all together, I wanted to simply end with a work that puts several of these aspects we talked about, differences in articulation, a singing line, repetition, different dynamics from loud, full orchestral to soft strings. And now, before I begin the Chopin, here's the whole piano in all its glory. And I'm just going to give you a little quiz for all those who are paying attention. How many centimeters in length is this piano? And the answer is 308 centimeters. That's why it's called the Fazioli F308. Now let's have some Chopin.